Hi, this is Jen Rubin, editor-in-chief of the Contrarian. We are thrilled to have back with us the senator from the great Commonwealth of Virginia, Senator Mark Warner. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Jen.
So we are in shutdown mode. The president and his Republican colleagues seem bent on taking healthcare away from millions and millions of people. What's the latest?
Well, the latest is people should be sitting down and talking. There are some sidebar conversations, but this reluctance, it seems, for Thune or the speaker to sit down with the Democrats, I don't get it. The fact that House is even out of session, are they going to stay out forever? It's kind of insulting. And when I raise with Republicans, well, they say, well, Mark, we can deal with this later. Well, no, people are getting the notices this month, and they're going to be blown away by how much the costs are going up. And then starting on November 1st, there is the issue of you got to sign up for the exchange. So this needs to be addressed now, I believe, in tandem with reopening. And frankly, one of the things I've also raised, and maybe this would be a give from the Democrats, but because of the Trump tariffs, we're having devastation in the Midwest, particularly with soybean farmers. If there needs to be federal relief for the farmers, why don't we put that in there now too? Why, have this big fight and then come back and fight on that a week later? So if there's a will, there's a way. I have been surprised that there's not been more willingness to talk. And I candidly, and this is, this may be out of date by the time I even say the words, but the fact that there was such threats of randomly firing federal workers on Thursday and Friday, and that didn't happen, may mean that there's a feeling amongst some in the White House that they may be overreaching and their position is not quite as strong as they're trying to pound their chest and puff. But again, yeah. I could be contradicted by that in an hour or two. If
we certainly hope not, for the sake of the workers. It also seems to be that your message has really resonated with the public. People are concerned about healthcare by a very large margin. They seem to be blaming the Republicans rather than you and saying, no, you should stay out unless we get some relief on healthcare. Does that pleasantly surprise you, or did you anticipate people would get it?
Yes, well, I have been pleasantly surprised. And again, as you know, Virginia, we have one of the highest concentrations of federal workers around. But I also, I feel that is the way today. And over the weekend, I was down in Hampton Roads, large military installations, lots of events. And it was, 95.5 people saying, hang in there. Now it's at a, HBCU game between Hampton and Norfolk State, overwhelming. I am realistic enough to know, though, that that's the feeling today. I still think, if federal paychecks don't arrive on October 18th, that may be a different feeling. So let's just be, these are human lives that we're talking about. And I think that may be one of the reasons the public is feeling this way, because it's so evident that President Trump are treating these lies like political pawns and candidly showing no empathy at all for the federal workforce. Probably hasn't helped his position.
Very true. Let me switch gears a little bit to putting on your Senate Intelligence Committee hat. The president sent a very strange notice to Congress last week saying we are in an armed conflict, and he referred to the narcotics smuggling and these boats he's been blowing up with our U.S. military. Last time I checked, Congress was the only one to be able to declare an armed conflict. And
you're such a stickler.
I know. And it doesn't seem that they're in an armed conflict with us. We may be using arms against them. What's going on here?
Well, one, we have not, the briefings we've got from the administration so far are not satisfying on virtually any level. The one thing that we absolutely know is that the volume of drug trafficking that's coming to America from Colombia and even now a little bit from Ecuador is exponentially, I'm not going to give but it's much greater than 10 or 20 to 1 from those nations than from Venezuela. Number one. Number two, and let me be clear, that Maduro government is awful. One of my many regrets I had with President Biden is when the Venezuelan people voted overwhelmingly against Maduro a year ago. Biden didn't use the full force of our State Department to try to get him to go. Maduro, bad guy, the Trindalagua gang, or bad gangs. But the evidence that we should be in armed conflict, and as you said, Congress declares a state of war. If there is a short-term, immediate threat, a president can respond for up to it's only 30 days, but it appears if there is the discovery of, I think on one of the boats they've discovered the drugs, but if there are, and now I'm not talking about what I've seen in the classified setting, but what I've just seen on TV, a couple of these boats look like they're simple fishing boats. And, I worry, we are not a signatory, but there are things like law of armed conflict at sea. And I would hate to put our sailors in legal harm's way, because there are rules of the road about how you're supposed to intercede, even with a drug boat, fire above them the first time. If they run, then you can take them out. But these appear to be incidents where, frankly, with no warning, the boats.
And in fact, the Secretary of State was bragging that we could have interdicted them, but instead we blew them up, which does seem violative of both international as well as domestic law. There are some people who suspect that there is a connection between this very broad, very vague declaration of war and how Trump is militarizing the streets of U.S. cities. We saw him unsuccessfully try to move into Portland. He's trying the same thing in Chicago. How concerned are you about his use and abuse of National Guardsmen as he kind of shuffles them around the country like pawns on a chessboard?
Well, I'm very concerned about the misuse of National Guard, and I'm glad to see the judiciary stand up. My understanding is the judge who disallowed the Oregon National Guard was actually a Trump appointee, and that is great to hear in terms of adherence to rule of law. But Jen, I would last week was a pretty grim week from where I sit, but where I thought was literally the best news was when Hegseth, who is so far over his competency, should not be at the Department of Defense, brought in all of these generals and admirals for the pep rally and a lecture. I was so proud of our military leadership how they reacted to both him and to President Trump. They were respectful. They didn't turn. They sat silently as they should. I came away thinking last week, oh my God, when every other institution seems to be bending the knee, from the media to universities to law firms to businesses, you name it, the tech world, it appears that our military leadership, in my mind, reinforced the fact that they are taking oath to a constitution, not to an individual. So in a week that otherwise not a lot to smile about, I thought that was helpful, and I felt really good. And and I've seen, I know the price of standing up for rule of law is hard. When the president called Tim Kaine and I bad guys recently, which I wear with a certain badge of honor, because the people that we had suggested to be U.S. attorneys for the Western District and Eastern District of Virginia, major federal prosecutors, they had wonderful Republican credentials. The Trump White House even thanked us profusely about how professional we were. We put people in charge. We put people forward for the president. He could choose whoever he wanted that were ideologically aligned with him. The only thing we asked was that they don't do anything that would break the law. And it appears that directly or indirectly, they were both forced out because they wouldn't do improper things. I'll leave it at that.
Well,
so I'm proud whenever people stand up
yes,
rule of law over immediate self-interest.
And the judge in Oregon, who was a Trump appointee, by the way, basically read the riot act to the government's lawyer and said, when he claimed, well, I'm not a policymaker trying to get out from this charade they pulled off, she said, but you're a lawyer. And it was kind of refreshing to hear a judge stand up for the rule of law. Our lower courts do seem to be holding the line. The Supreme Court, though, is back this term, and we're going to have to see whether they continue to give way to Trump or whether they begin to listen to the lower courts. Are you encouraged by these judges who really get into the facts and make rulings on reality, not on Trump's fantasy?
Yes, I'm encouraged by the lower court judges, and again, I went to law school, but I never practiced a day of law. So I do not posit myself as having any great legal knowledge at all. But it appears there have been many times that the Supreme Court has allowed Trump to proceed, but my understanding at least is most of these have been on process grounds, not on the substance.
Right.
And so hope gotta stay springs eternal. I mean, the fact that, for example, that he didn't allow the firing of Lisa Cook at the Federal Reserve, maybe that was affected by the fact that all of the living former Feds, at least chairman, didn't matter Democrat or Republican, it all said, this goes beyond the bounds. I so believe this has nothing to do with Democrat, Republican, a lot of this, but about somebody who is trying to push the president is trying to push every boundary possible to consolidate more and more power. And I just hope and pray that, more people in various domains stand up. And I think there is a fear that if you stand up individually, you're going to get retribution or whacked. So I do hope there are people are quietly talking amongst themselves across domains so that, when that event comes, which I'm afraid will come, where, it just pushes too far, that people will have the courage to stand up for rule of law, stand up for the Constitution. I came away, obviously, by reiterating this point, but came away pretty satisfied that our military will do that. And that is, no matter how many folks he hires at ICE with now only a 47-day training period, by the way, because he is the 47th president. I've met with ICE officials. They normally take 6 to 8 months to train someone. But no matter how many folks he hires at ICE, if our military is staying true, that's hugely important.
Well, I think you are right that Trump's biggest enemy is Trump because he tends to overreach and then force the Supreme Court to act, force the military to begin to hold the line. So I hope your optimism is well placed on the Supreme Court. They're going to have a chance. They have both the Federal Reserve case, they have the tariff case. They have to decide whether they're going to put their stamp of approval on that. And obviously a whole slew of other cases. Thank you, as always, Senator, for joining us. We always appreciate your perspective. And it seems like you guys are sticking together on the healthcare. So I wish you good luck in continuing to persevere.
Thank you so much, Jen. Thanks for your time.